You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise via the motivation given by the members both from Nicholas and Oceanside when the member says, someone here ever work picking crops in the farms? And I stand up because I have to openly admit that I worked picking grapes one summer for one whole week. And it was that one whole week that convinced me and taught me how to honor and respect the individuals who do that work. It was that 1 week that motivated me to decide to focus on my studies and to ensure that my path was not like my folks and my aunts and uncles who had, unfortunately, not the opportunity to go on to higher education. And therefore, that 1 week motivated me to pursue higher education. Let me share with you, members, that I represent a district that is an economy-driven district by ag and the hospitality industry. And so those two particular industries, as we know very well, are not the highest paying jobs that we have here in California. They are noble jobs, they are hardworking jobs, but they are not the highest paid jobs here in California. And so as we debate this issue and we talk about the history of why the 1938, what I refer to as the Unfair Labor Act, is still in place, it's mind-boggling to me that when we look at the face of the people who work in this industry, that we do not take into consideration the correlation between the high levels of poverty, the high levels of health disparities in our communities, the high levels of education, the lack of education attainment in these poor communities. And then we wonder why we have parts of California that continue to have double-digit unemployment rates, double-digit rates of poverty. And I can't imagine that between the industry and the commitment that we make to people in California, that we cannot come to the table and recognize that the policy that's still in place is just not right. It's just not right. The fact of the matter is that the author, and I want to thank her for taking considerations for some of these amendments. And, you know, her and I continue to dialogue about other areas that we can improve the policy. But the fact of the matter is that within the industry, there's been a line drawn in the sand. There's been a line drawn in the sand that it's not now, it's a bad timing, not next year, you're going to put us out of business. And quite frankly, Eduardo, they say to me, what don't you understand? This is going to have unintended consequences to the people you're trying to help. And my response is, so what can we do together to minimize or mitigate those unintended consequences so that the people that are sitting on the second floor, compañeros, párense, por favor, párense, for the people who are sitting in that second floor could have a decent salary to provide for their family, their children, and to ensure that our economies in districts like mine can grow and ultimately not have circumstances where we have 17% unemployment rates. Now, given that the industry is telling us that that number is going to go up, and that's unfortunate because that's telling me that we're not recognizing that the Unfair Act of 1938 is a problem. You know, we talk about, you know, when we want to address a problem, someone is sick, an addiction, or whatever it may be, the first step is to acknowledge the problem. And I'm not trying to suggest that we walk through a 12-step program with the industry, but I am trying to just highlight there continues to be a lack
30 seconds
of acknowledgement that this is a problem. Members, I am committed to working with the author of the bill I think that there is a lot of room for improvement to the policy, but I also think it's just the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, and I respectfully ask that before you push the red button or the green button, that you look at the folks that are standing up here today, and you look at them in the eyes and tell them that you cannot support this bill, that they are a second-class citizen in California, and that we do not care about them, we do not care about their children, and that ultimately, you know, the ag industry collectively isn't important to us in California. So, members, I respectfully ask for your consideration to support this bill and continue working on the policy with the member. Thank you.
A reminder to our membership, guest introductions occur during motions and resolutions. I would ask members on both sides going forward to keep their comments confined to the merits of the bill at hand. And I would also ask our many folks in the audience in our gallery, we thank you for joining us today. We ask that you refrain from any outbursts of any kind. We're going to maintain decorum in this chamber for the remainder of the day. Mr. Jones Sawyer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise in support of AB 2757. And first, I would like to acknowledge that the Assemblyman from Nicholas, I too can feel your passion for this. I too can feel how concerned you are with this law. And we've talked several times on many issues, so I know when you say you're concerned, it is from your heart. Now, many of us, when the speaker was first brought in, he gave us a book called The Grapes of Wrath. Some of us read it. Some of us use it as, decoration. Probably some of us use it as paperweight, and some use it as a doorstop. But I reread it. And The Grapes of Wrath, which was written in 1939, really talks about man's inhumanity to man. Steinbeck consistently and woefully points to the fact that an immigrant's great suffering is caused not by bad weather, drought, or mere misfortune, but by their fellow human beings. Historically, social, and economic circumstances separate people into rich and poor, landowner and tenant, and in this case, farm worker, and how the people in the dominant role struggle to preserve their positions. In Steinbeck's Brief History of California, for example, he portrays our state as the product of land-hungry squatters who took the land from Mexicans by working it, making it produce, and rendered it their own. In order to protect their property, landowners created a system in which immigrants are not necessarily treated well, denied a livable wage, and forced to turn against their brethren simply to survive. The novel draws a simple line through our country, one that divides the privileged from the poor and identifies that division as the primary source of real suffering in our world. Members, it is time for California to update the original overtime exemption that was set 78 years ago, the same time as Steinbeck wrote this book, which was published 77 years ago. It is time for us to make the change. It is time for us to make it right. I ask you to vote aye on this very important bill.
Thank you, Ms. Jones-Sawyer. Ms. Olson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to AB 2757, but I would begin by echoing the comments of my seatmate and colleague from St. Nicholas, who said, I do understand that the intentions of the bill are sound, that the intentions of the bill are to to help the farm workers that we all care about. But unfortunately, I think if you really understand the industry and if you really start to deconstruct the bill, it hurts the very people that we're trying to help. My colleague from San Diego suggested that we have a different image of farm workers. I'll tell you what the image I have in my mind of a farm worker is. My image of a farm worker is my dad, who some of you know grew up as a farm worker. My image of a farm worker is my cousin, who today is a farm worker, who works in the fields today. And it's hard work. My sister and my brother-in-law are farmers. It's hard work. I live in a farming community. I grew up with people who were farm workers, who are farm workers. I do life today with people who are farm workers, friends, former classmates, family members, as I've described. And members, the laws on the books are different for farm workers for very real and specific reasons. As has been indicated by other speakers, weather is a huge factor in the hours related to the hours in which you can harvest and you cannot. Perishable crops is a huge factor. In the April time of year, in the spring, my brother and his workers work really intense hours for about 6 weeks. In the fall, they work really intense hours for about 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, depending on the particular year. Other parts of the year, they have tremendous freedom to spend time with their families. They make enough money during those times of the year that maybe the month of December they get to take off and spend as a family. Farm workers have that flexibility as well. And you know what? They're not the only group of employees that doesn't get overtime. Let's talk about our own staffs. Many of our staff members have been working around the clock all week. Not a single one of them gets overtime pay. So this is not a unique situation to farm workers. Laws were designed for specific reasons because of the needs of specific industries. And those laws work. Those laws have allowed us to be the agricultural capital, not of the nation, but of the world. And I want us to remain that place in California. Members, it's been stated that farm workers have made 92 cents an hour, that farm workers are treated as second-class citizens. And frankly, those comments are offensive. My sister, my brother-in-law work really, really hard to pay their workers good wages. When one of their farm workers was really ill, terminally ill, my sister and my brother-in-law took time to spend every hour of the day in the hospital, at the bedside with that worker and his family. These workers become a part of their family. They're not second-class citizens that are just treated differently. They are working side by side with the farmers, side by side of the family members of the farmers, side by side with people like my nephew, who considers the workers on their farm a part of his very own family. They celebrate holidays together. They celebrate birthdays together because they aren't second-class citizens. They are members of the family. And they work together to make sure that their farms can thrive and provide the food that our communities, our state, our nation, and our world relies on. Remember, if we pass this bill, there will be devastating unintended consequences. Hours will be cut. Take-home pay will be reduced. And it will become even more difficult for these workers to provide for their families. Let's make sure that the agricultural workers in our state can earn a good living and can thrive and can pay for the high cost of living in California.
30 seconds, Ms.
Members, if you care about farm workers, if you care about family farms, if you care about working families who already struggle today to pay the high food costs in our stores, then please vote no on this bill. Think twice before you cast a vote. If you care about our state, if you care about our rural agricultural economies, and as I said, if you care about farm workers, family farms, and consumers, please vote no.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Mr. Rambula, you are recognized from your desk.
Permission to read, Mr. Speaker?
Without objection.
Luke 6:43. A good tree can't produce bad fruit. A bad tree can't produce good fruit. A tree is identified by its fruit. Figs are never gathered from thorn bushes, and grapes are not picked from bramble bushes. A good person produces good things from the treasure of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart. Today, I stand for the first time on this assembly floor to speak my mind. Yo soy un hijo del valle. Nací y crecí en el Valle Central de San Joaquín. Mi padre fue el primera persona de nuestra familia que nació aquí, en los Estados Unidos. Mis abuelitos entraron y trabajó para todos los días en los campos. I am a son of the valley where I was born and raised. I was born in Delano, in the middle of a farm-working community, and my father was the first of my family to be born here in America. My grandparents worked every day of their lives, and I have dedicated my life to working in a farm-working community. While I was an emergency room doctor, I took care of everyone who walked through my doors. And I took care of people who had heat stroke. I took care of people who suffered from working too long under the sun, under difficult conditions. As a Valley native, I understand the importance of agriculture to our community and our local economy. It depends on a successful agriculture industry and a thriving community of workers. Deciding how to vote on this measure was not easy for me from where I come from. I met with literally hundreds of people around the valley on both sides of an issue. But as an emergency room doctor in Selma, I saw firsthand farm workers who were in poor health because of the harsh conditions they encounter in the fields. It is difficult, physically demanding, and exhausting work, often in the hot summer sun. This weekend in Fresno, on Saturday, it's going to be 108 degrees outside. 108 degrees. It is telling that I saw these conditions more in farm workers than in their colleagues who worked in similar occupations. After lots of meeting and lots of thought, I have decided to support this measure. I decided that this is an issue of equity, that workers who process and pack fruit get overtime, but those who pick the fruit do not. I believe that this bill contributes to a growing valley economy and a growing middle class. I humbly ask for your support.
Ms. Waldron, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate all the comments of all my colleagues, both for and against this bill. I represent a district that is 80% agricultural and rural, believe it or not, in San Diego. And I know that our farmers have been a big part of the heritage of that area. In fact, we just celebrated the 100th anniversary last weekend of the San Diego County Farm Bureau. So, we have a long-standing history. But when I look at the impacts farms are facing between, in my area, the pests that have to do with the citrus and the grape crops, the various diseases, the fuel costs that are so high in my area, the lack of water reliability and the prices through the roof, the threats to their livelihood from imported avocados, that's a very real threat, and et cetera, and et cetera. And now we are having this debate. And when I asked my farmers what their opinion on this, they said, well, we've been good to our workers. We're just going to have to cut the hours. And cut the hours they will. They'll either have to go out of business, or they will either do double shifts, or they'll reduce the amount of hours they are. And that's the reality. So while we do all have a concern for the farm workers that we're trying to help, I think this bill will lead them to actually make less money in the long run. So I urge a no vote.
Thank you, Ms. Walder. Mr. Thurmond, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I had not intended to speak. I am so moved by the experience that I've heard shared today from those who either from their own labor or that of their family have been in the farm worker movement and done the hard work that we all benefit from, and to hear from those who either themselves or their family members are the farmers who try to balance the needs of those who do the work with the pressures and the costs of doing that business. It would seem on the surface just obvious, easy. We pay everyone overtime, and that we should do the same here too. It becomes complicated by the stories we've heard that the cost of business makes it difficult to balance that. And I'm sympathetic to it. I really am. I believe that we have to approach this conversation in a way that does not create an us and a them. I believe that we have to find a way to do two things that are not easily accomplished. I believe in my heart that there is no way that we can tell someone who works what would normally be considered an overtime hour that they can't be paid overtime, when we pay every other group overtime for working overtime hours. We have this message in so many of our traditions that say we value hard work and that we reward hard work. When someone works 19 hours, it is hard for me to imagine any framework where I could look a person in the eye and say that your 19 hours of hard work don't warrant the ability to earn a little more for your family in a way that is comparable to someone else who might have done the same kind of hard toiling work. This is not a statement from me about being against small business. We have to do everything that we can to support farmers and small business because that's where our jobs come from. We have to look at how this bill could be implemented in a way that provides the overtime provisions for the farmers and gets implemented in a way that helps us, as many of my colleagues have said, to mitigate the impacts to the farmers themselves. That has to be our conversation. We cannot approach this in a simple way. We must look at it in a complicated way. Many have said that farmers will simply just cut the hours. They'll go to double shifts. And that's certainly an approach. And maybe it will happen. The little I know about economics, though, tells me that that carries an opportunity cost. When you sideline your best workers because you're trying to save, that might be a strategy. But that strategy, too, may have an impact. When you sideline your best worker, you'll have to consider the opportunity costs. What did you really gain if you figured out a way to not pay overtime? What did you lose by perhaps employing someone who was not as talented or as productive as your number one person? I have to tell you, as I sat here, I thought of a quote, one of my favorite quotes, that talks about how injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In that, if we tell someone that we will pay overtime to anyone who works more, but we say to you, the farm worker, that we will not, I can't imagine any other way to think about that other than injustice, even with feeling sensitive to the needs of balancing the costs for the farmers. I implore you, colleagues, today, let's take the action to provide the overtime provisions, but let's not stop there. Let's do the hard work to figure out how to support farm workers so they can earn more money. We invest in those who do the hard work so they can invest in their families, which in turn they'll be investing in our local communities because they'll have more money to spend. Let's not take the easy decision. Let's make the hard decision to move forward and provide the overtime and work on the implementation in a way that we look for ways to mitigate the impact to the farmers themselves. I respectfully urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Mr. Mathis, you are recognized.
Members, I must rise in opposition to AB 2757. Now, I may just be an Okie boy from Porterville whose family came from the Dust Bowl, who worked their way up, who never quite owned anything but always worked in the fields and on the farm. Permission to read.
Without objection.
Luke 14:5. Then he turned to them and said, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush out to get him out? Members, ag work is seasonal. We were asked, what is the problem? We must acknowledge the problem. The problem's Mother Nature. The problem is the seasons. This isn't a 9 to 5 in a factory or in an office. This is get up before the crack of dawn and go out and work before it reaches the 108 temperature where it's too hot to be out. I personally find it an insult that we continue to call them farm workers. They're artisans. It's a craft. We go out, we prune, we pick, we do these things. This is a skilled job. But the timing is everything. If you don't do it at the right time, you completely lose out, which means your job, your work for your family is done for that entire season. So it's not like, oh, you just got laid off, or, oh, the factory line shut down. You're done. Then you're in the unemployment line. Because the work is done, because Mother Nature or a storm or whatever happened, you have to get out at all hours and different times. So to sit here and try to put the work, the care, that bond with man and Mother Nature to produce something from this earth into the box of a 9 to 5 is just wrong. Y'all don't even know what you're talking about. You can sit here and try to say that you do, but you don't. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to get woken up to go do these things. Seriously think about the people that we are talking about here today. The people that are up in the audience. The people that are back home. This is their craft. They are skilled at it. When we sit here, they don't work in a box. They work with Mother Nature, which is constantly changing. Seriously think about that time frame. Think about what that looks like. And think about how that affects their families if it goes wrong. I ask for a no vote.
Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise not really in support or opposition, but in frustration. I didn't want this debate here on this floor today to be viewed as a partisan debate, because it is not a partisan debate. There is an underlying issue related to AB 2757 that's not being discussed in this debate. The author from San Diego is a passionate, righteous, and just person who's fighting for a righteous and just cause on this issue. But we have a very difficult economy in our rural communities and in agriculture. We have an economy that's under assault by climate change policy. We have an economy that's under assault by our environmental laws, our rising energy costs, our rising labor costs, and an economy that's not getting a whole lot of help from Sacramento. And I've heard a lot of folks get up and speak here this afternoon. In fact, I've even written some of the names down because I'm going to come back to you when you want to take some action to help some of the folks that are sitting up here today. In the last half a century, we've increased our water supply 1%. 1%. We've doubled the population. Is that sensible policy? Of course it's not. We've had to fallow acres when we passed a Groundwater Sustainability Act off this floor that many of you supported that cost folks work. Now, does any of that mean that we should be in opposition to folks making a decent wage? Of course it doesn't. But it does mean, and thank you to my colleague from Oakland for talking about approaching this holistically. It does mean that we need to make sure that we have the water, that we make sure that we don't have regulatory barriers to success, and make sure that our folks who are competing, not just throughout the country, but throughout the world. And it is great for those of you that represent companies like Apple and Google that can pay their employees hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, they can do those things partially because those products are being assembled by people who make dollars a day throughout the world, not dollars an hour. Well, our folks are making and competing in that same global world without those same advantages, unable to pay their employees hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And believe me, being somebody who represents a district that's almost 100% an ag economy, we'd love to see our folks make more money. That's more money that's going to be spent right at home in our family businesses, in our community. So I wanted to get up. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but I want to implore all of you, let's not just pay lip service to these folks today on this particular issue.